Hello, everybody. In this video, we're going to be covering the topic of Joe Biden surging back into the lead for this election. So, I'm just going to show you some polls here. We could take a look at the most recent ones that just keep showing Biden up, leading here. Honestly, the only reason RCP even has Trump leading is because of the really terrible pollster called Rasmussen Reports. Extremely right wing bias shows Trump up by 8. If you minus that from the average, Biden would actually be ahead in the popular vote on Real Clear Politics. So, again, I would just argue that Biden's in the lead at this point in the national popular vote, and he's only going to keep gaining at this point because he's finally started to spend money out of his huge war chest. He's opened up a ton of field offices in all these swing states here that's going to really start to show in these polls, and we're already starting to see Biden start to take the lead again. And most of the major pollsters, we've seen like 10 out of the last 14 of them show improvements for Biden. So we are seeing the trend going towards Biden at this point, and I just think he's just going to continue to build on that lead at this point. Honestly, I expect Biden to probably, right now, I would have him probably winning the popular vote by 3%. I think that's where he's probably going to land at the end of the day, just based off all the trends so far. So I'm redoing my prediction from the beginning of April because a lot of polls have pretty much changed my mind in a lot of these states. I think Biden has definitely pretty much probably even caught up to Trump at this point as we fill in these states. But let's just get into the first few ones. So Alaska, a new poll out of there pretty much shows Trump over 10 here. So I think he'll probably get over 50% avoiding ranked choice voting. Iowa and Ohio are lost causes. Biden has little chance at winning them at this point. Texas as well. It's just pretty much going to be a likely Republican state. I don't really think Biden should invest that much time in here. I think he should rather focus on North Carolina, which is actually winnable for him. Florida is also pretty much not winnable for Biden. I just don't see it happening because, again, there's just every month goes by, more Republicans get registered here, pretty much net gaining the Republicans more supporters. And a lot of Republicans are just moving to the state overall, and just Cuban voters continue the shift right here, and Latino voters too. So going into New Mexico and Virginia, they're not going to be competitive at all. New Hampshire, I also would probably put this as a likely blue state. Most pollsters show Biden up here by over 5 points, and I just don't think Trump's going to close the gap here. Maine is interesting because there's not been a lot of polling done here, but the one poll that has been done here shows Trump up, but at the same time, it's not that much of a well-known pollster. So let's see if we could go to like the statewide polls here. I just want to talk about Maine for a second. I really doubt that poll in Maine that it also has Maine's first district as likely, which I highly doubt as well. And the other total's 30%. Other candidate with 23. That's not going to happen in the state of Maine. I don't expect the third party total to get above 10% here in this state. And I pretty much never heard of Pan Atlantic research before. And I just think that poll's a bit off in Maine. I think Biden's still ahead here, probably by about 5 points or so. So I think New Hampshire probably might be a little bit more Democratic than Maine coming up in 2024. But I have Maine at large as a likely state, while Trump's winning Maine second by an over 10-point margin, probably about a 10-point win like Ohio. Moving to Nebraska second, I also still have this as a lean blue district, but it could shift to likely blue based on polling, but I'm still waiting for more polling done here because there haven't been any so far. So moving on to the states of North Carolina and Georgia, I am changing the margin in Georgia from lean to tilt R, mainly because I do think Biden has definitely caught up in the election, as we're seeing in the trend lines for these polls. Wall Street Journal also has it. It's only 1% lead. Marist has it about a 4-point lead, I would say. But I would probably put it as tilt Republican. Again, I don't think Trump's going to somehow shift that state that much in his favor, but so far he's still ahead here, in my opinion. And in North Carolina, I think this is going to be much more narrower than people expect. I think Trump's probably going to only win here by about 1.5%, probably about 2%, I would say. As of right now, I think he's ahead by that much, I would argue. Moving on to the states of Nevada and Arizona. So with Nevada, Democrats usually outperform the polls here. That's just one of those states where in history that seems to be the case here. However, Trump, he still has a pretty sizable lead here. He's still up by about 4, some polls up by 2. Again, I think it's a tilt Republican state so far still, but I wouldn't give a massive advantage to Trump here. Biden's still in the game here, especially if he gets strong Latino turnout for himself and he improves his margins with Latino voters. He could trend the state back towards him. Now, the state of Arizona, I just don't really believe the polling here that much, especially when it comes to elections. We saw 2022 Senate was supposed to be a tied race in Arizona, and Mark Kelly, the Democrat, wins by 5 against Blake Masters. And we look at Trump's lead here, and it's not over 50% typically, except for one Emerson poll, but most polls here have him in like the mid to high 40s, while Biden's just a few points behind. Again, with Maricopa County, we look at the Republican primary here. Nikki Haley did extremely well for a candidate that dropped out of the race in a closed Republican primary. So I'll just show you the numbers here. She got about 17% of the vote, and she did pretty darn good in this county of Maricopa. And Trump needs to get good margins out of Maricopa County to win this state. He needs to prevent Biden from gaining too much of a lead from that one county. And I do think a lot of those Nikki Haley voters are going to go towards Joe Biden. We saw a lot of moderate Republicans back in 2020 vote for Joe Biden against Trump in this state of Arizona. So for now, for that reason alone, I'm not listening to polling for Arizona. I just think Maricopa County trending for the Democrats, it's going to continue the trend that way. And especially with that state Supreme Court ruling in Arizona, pretty much trying to ban abortion in the state, that's only going to fuel Democratic turnout here in Arizona. We're probably going to see the state legislature flip for the Democrats in Arizona just because of that ruling. So again, we saw how when Republican courts go after abortion, it enrages independent voters to vote for the Democrats. We saw that in 2022, and we're probably going to see it again in 2024 in these swing states, especially Arizona. So I have this as a Democratic hold. Moving on to the state of Minnesota, polls still show the race in Minnesota to be decently close due to high third-party support. We see in a recent poll there that only has Biden up by 2. But at that same time, that specific poll, young voters, Trump's winning massively, so there's reason to doubt it. However, I'm going to be safe because, again, uncommitted did fairly well in the Democratic primary here, getting about 18% of the vote or so. That's not a margin to scoff at. They even won delegates because they got over 15%, which is interesting. So because of that high third-party total in Minnesota, I would probably put this as a lean blue state for now. It's not going to be likely blue. But moving on to the state of Pennsylvania, this is a state that I'm fairly certain that Biden's polling the best in. And the in-state pollsters in the state of Pennsylvania, he consistently leads. But out-of-state pollsters show Trump with the lead here. But I rather believe the in-state pollsters because they actually have a track record of getting things correct in the state more often than the out-of-state pollsters. So I have this as a tilt Biden state for now. I think he wins here by a margin of under 1%. So moving on to the states of Michigan and Wisconsin. We're going to cover Michigan first because I've changed my mind in the state as well. So recent poll actually shows Biden up here for once instead of being down towards down against Trump. And again, we're seeing Biden fix his the war in Gaza policy. He's trying to push Israel for a ceasefire in that conflict. And I definitely do think that would help him with Democratic voters here who did vote in a pretty massive way for the uncommitted candidate here. They got about 13% of the vote in the Democratic primary here. I think he could win them back. I don't think they're a lost cause. I think him pushing for a ceasefire in that conflict would definitely help him with voters here. And let's be real here. These voters are probably going to realize that Trump would be far worse on the issue. So I do think the concept of the lesser of two evils here would definitely come out and play here. We saw a lot of Democrats back in 2020 say they weren't going to vote for Biden, especially Bernie Sanders supporters. And at the end of the day, they ended up voting for Biden. So I think we're going to see them come back to the Democrats come November. And I really think that Michigan being a much more Democratic state than Michigan and Pennsylvania or Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, we're probably going to see Michigan's numbers shift back towards Biden. We're already kind of seeing it in the most recent poll here. And another thing is Trump's not over 50% in this state. I think Biden's actually slightly favored to win here. I think he's going to catch up. I really don't expect Trump's lead to hold much longer, especially with Biden opening up a ton of field offices in this state while Trump still has zero. And Biden just has a massive fundraising advantage. We're definitely going to see a lot of trends going for the Democrats long term at this point. I kind of expect it, especially if Trump doesn't continue to raise more and more money. He still has to pay his legal fees as well with that money. So there's a lot of issues for Trump. Fundraising is just one of them. And Biden's the incumbent. Typically, incumbents actually gain 2% more support than the polls are suggesting because they win over undecided voters, too. That's another factor that I don't see people addressing enough. So at the end of the day, I think Biden's going to catch up in the state of Michigan, which is why I have this as a tilt blue state. So moving on to the state of Wisconsin, Trump didn't do too well. Biden actually beat him in raw votes in the primary. Now, I don't think predicting based off primary results is the best example here, but we could look at that Nikki Haley vote total, especially in Waukesha County. I think Nikki Haley actually performed pretty decently there. Let's just take a look. Yeah, again, Nikki Haley did fairly well in Madison and a bit well in Waukesha County. I think a lot of these Haley voters are probably going to end up going for Biden at the end of the day as well. So that's further going to eat into Trump's margins here. And the uncommitted vote total didn't get that much against Joe Biden here. It only got 8% of the vote, unlike other Rust Belt states like Minnesota and Michigan. Overall, Wisconsin's a state that it likes to keep its incumbents in office. We saw that with the unpopular Senator Ron Johnson win re-election and Trump nearly winning the state back in 2020. So typically they like to keep their incumbents, and we also saw it in the governor's race back in 2022. I was wrong about that. I thought it would flip Republican, and it held Democratic. So Wisconsin typically likes to keep their incumbents, which is why I'm also changing my rating in Wisconsin to a tilt blue state. So I think Biden's going to probably end up winning the popular vote by about 3%. He doesn't need to win it by 4% because, again, Florida's just becoming more Republican, and New York probably will trend a bit more to the right, probably 2 to 3 points more Republican than it was last time around, which I'm kind of expecting, which would definitely eat away at Biden's popular vote lead without hurting him too much in the swing states here. But it's still a very, very narrow victory here. Look how many tilt states we got. We got 6 tilts, only 4 going for the Democrats, 2 for the Republicans. So it's still an extremely close election overall. But right now, I think Biden's the favorite again, mainly due to all the fundamentals going his way. And now we're seeing polling start to go his way as well. So at this point, I expect the election to continue to trend towards Biden just because of his fundraising advantages, incumbency advantages, and just all those factors here. I really struggle to see how Trump's going to make up that fundraising gap, and that's definitely going to hurt him in this election. Biden's probably going to outspend him possibly by 3 to 1. He outspended him by about 2 to 1, I believe, last time in 2020. But other than that, I think Biden's the favorite to win the election so far. He's regained that lead. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments down below. Do you agree or disagree with me? I'm always interested in hearing your feedback. But if you're new to the channel, I would highly recommend subscribing, especially if you enjoy political videos like this. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.